Hello everyone and welcome to this training session on NFR B3 Employee Administration and Payroll. Today we are going to go through some of the key details that you will need to know from NFR B3 Employee Administration and Payroll. We will be discussing at a high level the key parts of NFR B3 which you will need to be aware of. Just to flag from the start, it's not possible to cover off everything in detail, so all staff are required to be familiar with the document. With that in mind, we would recommend that staff read the documents themselves just to ensure that they're fully briefed on their day-to-day requirements. Firstly, what are the National Financial Regulations? So they're a set of policy documents which set out the financial controls for the organisation. They're not meant to be detailed procedural documents for financial processes or activities, as these are contained within your local procedures. But the aim of the NFRs is to provide high-level controls to guide your local procedures. Secondly, why is this particular training important? It's important that you are aware of the controls and guidance that you must follow when you're involved in employee administration and payroll. Moving on to an important question which discusses who is the actual target audience for the NFRs. In short, the NFRs have a very broad reach. They apply to all permanent, temporary and agency staff of all HSE divisions, CHOs, hospital groups where services are provided on behalf of the HSE, and Section 38 and 39 providers, where services are being provided on behalf of the HSE or where HSE grant aid and funding is being received. Moving on then to the purpose of NFR B3. So NFR B3 sets out guidance in relation to payroll, calculation of pay and payroll processing, and the treatment of over and under payments. NFR B3 explains the standards all HSE staff have to meet in terms of pay and expenses while performing their duties. It ensures staff know the key controls and regulations in place for payroll, and it aims to ensure that pay-related over and under payments are resolved without delay. The employee journey is best summarised by the map here on the slide. So the first employee journey is recruitment. So that might consist of advertising, identifying, sourcing, screening, shortlisting and interviewing candidates for jobs. The next step is employee setup, so setting up new employee records to include initial terms and conditions of the employee. The third step is terms and condition changes, so you might be adding changes to employee terms and conditions to the payroll system following approval, such as carers breaks, carers leave, unpaid leave and shorter working year. The next step is time return. So this is where a line manager provides a return to their time returning officer, the TRO, each week, reflecting the attendances and absences for employees in their area. The TRO then enters this information onto the local system or timesheets to instruct payroll on the entitlement for all payments and deductions within the payroll period. The next step in the employee journey is gross to net processing. So this is where all pay and hours worked, gross pay, minus any deductions equals to net pay. So gross pay is the total amount paid before any statutory or voluntary deductions are made. Statutory deductions might be things like PAYE income tax, USC, PRSI, pension contributions, local property tax and ASC. Examples of voluntary deductions might include travel pass systems, medical insurance, credit union deductions and union fees. The seventh step is the leaver, transfer or retirement step. So it's when an employee is leaving, transferring or retiring, and the individual's employee records are updated accordingly, and finally payments or transfer of payroll are actioned. The final step is the pensioner setup. So it's where an employee is converted to retiree status. Moving on then to the control objectives in administering payroll in the HSE. So they are to safeguard HSE assets, ensure staff are paid only after the appropriate authorisation, calculate and record payroll elements quickly, comply with all legal and taxation requirements, correct errors or omissions in pay as quickly as possible, administer and apply payroll consistently across the HSE, and ensure information security controls for payroll are in place. As an employee, you have a number of responsibilities when it comes to pay. So you must ensure all your hours worked and all absences taken are recorded and correct pay has been received. So you can do this by accurately recording from and to times worked and all authorised leave on your payroll returns document used in your area. So accurately reporting any pay adjusting changes, such as parental leave, shorter working year, cycle to work deductions, etc. You also need to be aware of your responsibility to notify your line manager immediately if there are any errors in your pay or leave balances. You also need to understand and fully comply with your local area processes for recording times worked and for application and recording of absences. And if you are unsure of the processes involved in your local area, contact your line manager to find out. You also must review your available leave to ensure that requests for leave do not exceed the appropriate level, and you must give sufficient notice of leave. Moving on then to responsibilities of a line manager. So if you're a line manager, you should ensure that you have local procedures in place in relation to payroll. So line managers should ensure that these procedures are communicated and they're available for all staff in their team to refer to. They should outline the various roles and responsibilities of all staff, including those who prepare, review, verify, certify and enter times worked and absences taken. And finally then, they should be signed and dated, and they should include a date for review and updating. The line manager also has to ensure that all payroll data for their team is completed on time, in full, appropriately checked, verified and authorised. They must also ensure that any additional allowances or deductions are accurately recorded and reconciled to the timesheets, on-call sheets or corresponding deduction forms, and they must ensure that self-certification never occurs. In relation to payroll reconciliation, line managers should ensure that there's checks and verification on the payroll data, just I suppose to satisfy themselves that only accurate times worked and absences taken have been recorded for their team. In relation to employee contracts then, so line managers should also ensure that everyone's contracts are up to date in their team, and they include commencement and end dates, salary scale points and any other relevant conditions that apply to their pay. And these contracts then must be signed by the staff member and appropriately authorised. If you have staff that are on additional payments such as overtime or on-call payments, then you must ensure that these additional hours are accurately recorded, checked, appropriately authorised and they're in line with the HSE terms and conditions of employment. Line managers also have a responsibility when it comes to agency staff. So there might be some teams out there that have agency staff. And if you do, it's important to have procedures documented for booking, recording and processing the agency staff members' payroll payments. So as a line manager, you should also have a process in place to identify and monitor staff who might work for more than one employee group. So if that's the case, additional checks and controls have to be put in place just to avoid duplicate payments occurring in error. All agency timesheets should detail all the hours worked and if there's any absences taken. They should be reviewed for accuracy and completeness and then certified. And when you do receive the invoices then from the agency, these should be date stamped, reconciled to the relevant agency timesheets and recalculated just to make sure there's no errors. And if there are any errors, these should be noted and investigated immediately. Once you're happy with the invoices and they have been checked properly, they should be signed and dated as certified for payment. Line managers do have additional responsibilities when it comes to employee administration and payroll, and a full list of these is included in section 2.6 of the NFR. It's important that line managers make every effort to ensure that all staff on their team are able to avail of their full annual leave entitlement within the annual leave year. So when it's year end, line managers need to reconcile annual leave records for all staff to corresponding inputs, and if there's any errors, it's important to investigate these immediately and rectify them. If for some reason a staff member has not been able to take their full annual leave entitlement, the line manager needs to verify the carried forward balance, they need to document the reason why there is a carried forward balance, and if appropriate, then they need to approve the balance to be carried forward into the next leave year. The notification of sick pay by the Department of Social Protection changed back in 2018. So since then, the employee must let his or her line manager know of the amount of illness or occupational injury benefit that they're in receipt of. So that's just to ensure that necessary adjustments to pay can be made. So the onus is on the employee to notify their line manager. But that said, the line manager has some duties too. So they must inform employees of their obligation under the circular, so it's HR Circular 05/2018, and they must also remind employees to submit this information if or when the employee is out on sick leave. You also have to ensure the relevant systems are up to date with regards to sick leave. You must advise payroll, and you must communicate as appropriately as you can with the employee is on sick leave. So HR and National Payroll have some useful memos and circulars regarding illness benefit and what to do in circumstances where you or your staff members are out on sick, so you should touch base with them for more information.
Although controls and procedures are in place to avoid incorrect salary payments, employees may occasionally receive an overpayment or underpayment of salary. All staff members are obliged to notify payroll if it is believed that they have been overpaid or underpaid for any reason. It's HSE policy to correct these errors as soon as possible. The Payment of Wages Act 1991 affords an employer a legal right to recover any overpayment of wages, allowances or expenses from the wages of employees. When an overpayment to an employee is discovered, initial engagement with the employee should be completed by the party responsible for the overpayment. For overpayments greater than €200, a letter will be issued to the employee from the party responsible for the overpayment with the assistance of the Finance Shared Service Payroll Department. The letter outlining the overpayment details must include items listed in Section 5.1.1 of NFR B3. There's also templates for these letters included in the NFR if you have to draft such a letter. As a line manager, you are responsible for confirming that you are in compliance with NFR B3 and sick leave circulars. You are also responsible for submitting HR or payroll forms on time, and you must also notify payroll if you have staff members going on unpaid leave, resignations, job sharing, parental leave, overtime, or if there's any allowance due. So all types of unpaid leave really. So if these responsibilities are not followed, people may end up getting over or underpaid. As an employee, if you are over or underpaid, you have to inform payroll immediately. If you have an overpayment amount up to and including €200 gross, that will be recouped in the next payroll run. For amounts that are overpaid more than €200 gross, a letter is issued to an employee alerting them to an overpayment and asking them to contact the payroll office if they wish to discuss the repayment plan. Otherwise, the repayment plan will commence through payroll. The recovery process needs to be in line with revenue guidance. Where the overpayment is more than €200, the number of pay periods allowed for recovery must not exceed the same number of pay periods in which the overpayment occurred, and any changes in future income shall be considered in negotiating a repayment schedule. If the repayment schedule is too difficult, a revised schedule can be negotiated. If you have an employee that thinks they have been underpaid, they should bring this matter to the attention of their line manager immediately. The line manager will examine the relevant time records for that employee and inform the employee, detailing the hours or value of the underpayment. Details of the underpayment will be recorded in the employee's next time recording return and the value or hours paid in the next pay period. Payroll department must keep records and correspondence of all overpayments and underpayments.
I just want to draw your attention to a new addition in the NFR B3, which lists all the HR forms, where to send them to and when to send them by. So it is a very useful page to have if you have someone taking different types of leave in your team. So you can find that in Appendix 5 of the NFR. So that brings me to the end of the training session on NFR B3 Employee Administration and Payroll. On this slide are the contact details for the Governance and Compliance team if anyone has any questions. So you can contact us on govn.compliance@hse.ie. On this slide as well we have some useful training resources and also our Governance and Compliance YouTube channel. And that contains videos on each of the 11 individual NFRs and they are good to watch. Most of them are just 15 or 20 minutes long, so they're good to watch if you just want a refresher on any of the NFRs. Your attendance and your attention today is very much appreciated and thank you for taking the time to watch this training session.